It's my great pleasure to introduce our next speaker. So this is Sonia, who I can see is on the screen. Hello, Sonia. Hi. And Sonia is going to talk about horizon scanning for new therapeutics in a pandemic and the use of preprint repositories for signal identification. So without further ado, if you'd like to do your talk, Sonia.
Thank you, Biddy. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me today here. Very interesting conference so far. Hope you find this interesting as well. I think the conversation about preprints have cropped up before, so hope you find this stimulating and there is some conversation afterwards. So, I'm here to present my own views, not those of my funders. My main funding body is the NIHR, and I work for the NIHR Innovation Observatory, which is hosted by Newcastle University. So I do feel I need to apologize in advance because perhaps some of you are very familiar with preprint and their repositories and how to search them. I wasn't so familiar a year ago. I am an information specialist by background, yet I had never used preprint before. So this was new for me a year ago. So a little bit of background about what's a preprint. As we probably all know by now, it's a manuscript of a scientific work which presents results, methods, etc., which is shared widely through a repository for others to consume, to use freely. These manuscripts are very similar to the ones that then are submitted to a journal for publication, but they are not peer-reviewed. Some journals have some sort of collaboration with preprint repositories whereby allow authors to use preprint repositories prior to submit it to the journal. Others don't do that. In terms of, as I said, preprints have been around. They have been around for quite some time. Again, I wasn't aware of that before. However, as this graph shows, they have been increasing in the last 3 years, particularly in 2020, the use of preprinting as means of disseminating early results. Yet, it's a small proportion if you compare it with what is being published. And this is just focusing only on the biomedical sciences. There are a number of preprint repositories and servers that cover the topic of health sciences, medicine, biology, biomedical sciences, which is the area where I work. And there are other preprint repositories available for other fields like environmental sciences or engineering. I've put this link in here so people can this is a really long list, so people can search. Maybe if you are working in another area, you may want to check what preprint repositories there are available for you. And for what I'm going to present next, we've only used 2 of those in this table, which are medRxiv and bioRxiv. So first of all, there are some advantages for authors of using preprint repositories or preprinting, because obviously that allows them to rapidly disseminate the outcomes of their scientific work. Obviously, if you are an author and you need funding or your grant is up for renewal, you can show you've done something without waiting for whilst perhaps the manuscript is being peer reviewed by the journal. It allows cooperation and collaboration with other researchers or authors in the same field. And also you can get, as an author, you can get early feedback on your work, because most of these preprint repositories allow for people to comment on the pieces of work, and that allows you to perhaps enhance your manuscript prior to submission to a journal. From the point of view of a researcher, obviously, if you are collaborating in a piece of research or belong to a team, it allows you to discover work that is ongoing when you need this access to this information in a timely manner. And this is probably the reason why we use these preprint repositories, because at the beginning of the pandemic, that's exactly what we needed to discover, these signals coming from this early work. It allows other interesting stuff like, research trends or identify experts in particular areas, and also allows you to access to publications that may never be published eventually because they don't go through the hurdles of peer reviewing, etc. So it's advantageous in that way. There are a number of things that you need to consider if you're going to use preprints for your horizon scanning or searching. Obviously, these are not peer-reviewed manuscripts, and that needs to be clear in your citation. It needs to be clear there is a preprint. Some repositories are really good at providing you with a suggested reference or citation. Others are not so good at that. Some of them have DOIs, others don't. So the URL may break eventually. Some preprint repositories may not tell you when the paper is published eventually in a few weeks or months' time. So you will never know unless you take the time to actually check it. Authors may submit to multiple preprint repositories. The preprint may disappear completely from the repository once the paper is being published. And finally, and most importantly, matching the preprint, even if it continues to exist in that repository forever, with the published paper, it's quite a difficult task. So authors may change the order, the title can slightly vary, but even the content can vary as well, the abstract. So it's kind of really difficult. So based on all of that I've thrown at you as a background, we then decided to use preprint repositories to identify early signals of results, either positive or negative results from clinical trials that were being set up at the beginning of the pandemic, and ever since throughout the last 14 months on COVID-19 therapeutics and vaccines. I think this is quite obvious why we provide the NIRIO, the NIHR Innovation Observatory, where I work. We provide early awareness notifications on intelligence to a number of national stakeholders, including NICE, NIHR, other horizon scanning organizations around the country, NHS England, and a number of different groups. Obviously, in this context, March 2020, first thing that happened was they came to us saying, give us something. We need to make decisions. We don't have any information or evidence of any therapeutic that is working, or whether there is any therapeutics in a clinical trial. So we set out from April 2020 to provide this intelligence to our stakeholders so they could make decisions on the basis of that intelligence. So we set out to search for ongoing clinical trials on vaccines and therapeutics for treating COVID-19. And here you can see in one snapshot what we tried to do. So we used an array of different sources. We searched clinical trial registries for the clinical trial protocols. We used global news outlets to search for any press releases or anything that was coming out of companies. But also we searched preprint repositories, mainly medRxiv and bioRxiv, for those early results that our stakeholders were so thirsty to get their hands on, so that there was some evidence coming out of those trials. This was an overwhelming task. There was lots of information to handle, and we needed to find a way of handling the searches and the filtration of those topics. So we devised a semi-automated text mining tool using Gate. I put the link in there. It is a free open source software using Python as the programming language. And 2 independent reviewers will check independently the output of this semi-automated tool. So essentially what the tool did was, given the clinical trial ID, it would use the trial ID to go and search for that any preprint that had that trial ID on the text, and then retrieve those and give them back to us so we could assess whether it was reporting results or was just a trial being mentioned in a paper, but it wasn't really reporting the results of that particular trial. So this has been ongoing ever since April 2020. We do this on a weekly basis. And so far we've identified about just over 3,000 ongoing clinical trials on any kind of therapeutic or vaccine for COVID-19 patients. Only a small proportion have reported preliminary results, and the way we communicate or disseminate this information is on our website. I put the link on the previous slide. So here is just a small proportion of results that have come out from either preliminary result searching in preprint repositories or news outlets. As you can see here, almost 50% of those results have been identified through medRxiv searching. So it has proved a very efficient way of identifying early results. And here's a timeline of that sort of justifies why and the use of horizon scanning preprints in this context. This is an example with one of the Chinese vaccines. So between April and September last year, they set up a bunch of clinical trials, early clinical trials. In August last year, they already produced the first preprints reporting early results on effectiveness of the vaccine. It wasn't until November that they published the paper. So had we waited for the paper to be published, we would have waited way longer to inform our stakeholders about this vaccine. And then it has been just licensed in China for use in February 2021. So what have we learned? Preprint repositories may be a good source of information if you are in need of early intelligence. Searching different preprint platforms can be cumbersome. Each one has slightly different searching facilities and platforms and features. Results may be duplicated amongst different repositories. References are not always available. And that matching the preprint, as I said before, preprint and published paper do not always match on essentials. So that is kind of a difficulty for deduplicating. And that's all from me. I hope you find it interesting and there is some conversation going on.
Thank you very much. I see I've unmuted and it worked this time. Thank you. That was really interesting. I suppose it also shows the real value of information professionals for stakeholders, you know, in a service, you know, and a really interesting insight. And you know, in terms of arguing your value, you know, that is just beautiful. It's you know, it's really good evidence. So thank you very much for that. Now, how are you able to transfer this learning to a non-pandemic situation? Or how will you, for example? You've gone very quiet, Sonia. I think you're on mute.
I was on mute, yes, sorry. That's a really good question. I am still unclear if this is something that we should be searching now from now onwards, or it really needs to depend on whether early intelligence is key. And there is no other way where you can get that intelligence from. There is no evidence, there's no published papers, and then you have to use that. I would be inclined to think that that is the case. But yes, again, interpreting results, you need they need to be taken with a pinch of salt, because again, these are not peer-reviewed manuscripts. They may contain some errors, etc. So this, I mean, drawing strong conclusions out of this only can be a bit dangerous. So
yeah,
yes, for horizontal scanning, not necessarily for other sort of research queries.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's interesting. And it's obviously very current as well, because I've got a student who's actually doing a dissertation looking at preprint repositories and questioning librarians about their views about them. So it's a really hot topic. One last question, I think, which is now I don't really know about this, but I'm hoping you do. It says, what text mining tools do you recommend?
Probably I'm not the best person to recommend any tool, because I didn't design this tool myself. We used Gate because the text mining expert at the time in our team was very knowledgeable of this tool particularly, and the language, etc. I'm not sure whether, again, my understanding is Gate is open source. People can learn how to use it. The team is quite willing to help like newbies to get into Gate text mining tool. I don't know of any other that I would have used. Again, you need to be able to know whether you need to pay for it, or your organization needs to pay for it, or is a free one. Gate is very common tool to be used, but I'm not sure which other one I would have used.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. That's great. I'm going to stop there with the questions because we've got 1 minute till the next presenter. So thank you very much, Sonia. Really interesting presentation.